Okay, so there are a lot of you visiting with us tonight who were not at class last Wednesday. So this is an overview of what we did in class last Wednesday, and I'm not going to go over the whole class, but you need to know something about what we're doing so that tonight makes some sense to you. This quarter we're talking about grace, and one of the things that we did last time was we said, what was grace? When the New Testament writers said that God has given us grace, the thing that we are asking is, what was that? What was the word grace that they took and used to describe for what God has given us? And the word grace is found, it's really more than 3 ways, but 3 ways will be enough for us right now. It's found and used in 3 different ways. The first describes, I think the best way that I would use the first one is to describe an attitude. And that's where we would say, God is a gracious God. God gives grace. He just is a gracious God. And so that's how you would use that. And it's not just that that word is only ever used about God. You could be a gracious person. But it's an attitude. The second way that the word is used is to describe the gift itself. And so if I give you the gift, that thing is grace. I'm giving you grace. And so grace is charis. Charisma is the word that we would use to describe spiritual gifts or graces. God gives graces. That's what that is. And then this is the thing that we set up last time to do our class tonight. In the ancient world, the picture of grace is that I give grace, I'm a gracious person, I give grace, and then this is just a social expectation. It's a demand. That's why I use the word demand for the title of this class tonight. If I'm gracious and give you grace, the social expectation is that you will return grace. Grace for grace. And then the thing that you will probably say about that is, but how could we ever return or repay the grace that God has given to us? And we can't. And that's not unique to God. It's the same thing that's true in the ancient world. If there is a wealthy person who gives a field to a farmer to farm, that farmer could never in his lifetime repay that gift. But there are some expectations that go with that. When grace has been given, grace must be returned. And so we'll talk about that return in just a second, but I wanted to share a couple of these with you. I like this. This is from De Silva. We read from him last week. Once favor has been shown and gifts conferred, the result must invariably be that the recipient will show gratitude, will answer grace with grace. That's what we're saying. I do grace for you, you do grace for me. And then this is a prettier way to say it that I really like this quote. It sits in my quote box until I find a place to use it in class. But I thought that this would be the best place. Man does not secure the grace of God. The grace of God secures the activities of man. God gives it as a gift. I don't secure it. I didn't work for it. I didn't earn it. There's nothing I can do to make him give it to me. I don't secure the grace of God. But when he is gracious to me, he secures he secures my response now. There is something that I'm supposed to do in response. Anything you want to say about that? Just the use of the word? Okay. This is what we did last time then. We talked about some examples of, I can never repay the grace of God, so what am I supposed to do? Well, there's plenty of examples in the ancient world. You're supposed to be grateful. You're supposed to publicly recognize the person. That doesn't really apply very much in our world today because it's just different. Like I use this illustration. If Jay does something super, super nice for me, well, I'll give you a good example. Sorry, I'll apologize first. The Thanksgiving thing, every year when they do the Thanksgiving thing and I say, Thank you to the suitors for doing the things, and publicly, thank you for doing the Thanksgiving thing. And then they always yell at me for saying something about it in front of other people. And it's like, don't do that. But when this is used in the ancient world, you are supposed to do that. It's a thing. There actually is a thing that I'm supposed to do that. And so not only I perform services, I can never repay the gift that God has given me, but I can do something. I can do something, and I'm expected to do something. And loyalty is a part of that. So that's our outline for tonight. Our outline for tonight is to go through and look at my reaction. My response to God's grace is these four things: gratitude, recognition, services, and loyalty. We're going to go through the Bible and see those four things. Anything you want to say about that before we get started? Any examples that you want to give before we get started?
The summons book and the public recognition, was that something that was like in the setting, like at the gate kind of thing, and they call it out, or was it just in kind of how I think we would do it in conversation, talking about a person, giving them honor because of how they've been gracious to us?
Yeah, both, but I am fascinated by this, and if I can find it. If somebody sends me an email, I won't remember. But if you send me an email and I'm sitting in front of my computer, I'll see if I can find you the norm. It was Seneca who wrote about it. There is an actual, this is written down. In the Roman world, this is the expectation. There is a time and a place where if you've done something nice for me, if you've been gracious to me, my job is to stand at the gate at this time so that when you come in, I can say, everybody, that guy's awesome. He has done so much good for me. That's a norm. It's expected. And there are actual standards and rules for how you do that. In the world where this was written, the Bible was written, the New Testament was written. Okay, how about this? I want to do one more thing. Let's go to John chapter 8. I want to start with John chapter 8 because I think that this is the way that I think I can really wrap my head around this the best. I'm not going to read the whole story. John chapter 8 is the story of the woman who was caught in adultery. Starting in verse 3, the scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery. They said, "Teacher, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery. Now the law of Moses commanded us to stone such a woman. So what do you say?" And this is where Jesus writes in the dirt and says, "Whichever one of you is without sin, be the first to throw the rock." And everybody leaves, and the woman is spared. And so, verse 10, Jesus stood up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" And she said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on sin no more." That's the part that I want you to think about. Let's talk about this for a second. Jesus says after these circumstances to this woman, "Go and don't sin anymore." And the question that I want us to think about is, do you think for that woman that don't sin anymore, do you think that was some sort of heavy burden that she had to carry around? How did she feel about that? What was her life like after? What's her response to this situation has passed and Jesus lays this on her? Go and don't sin anymore. How does she look at the world now and this command to not sin? What's her response? I mean, do you feel like she's just walking around like, "Oh, I can't sin, she's constantly tensed up because the temptation is flying all around me, and I really want to go over there and do that, but I can't because Jesus said I'm not allowed to, and she's doing that." Is that what it's like?
In some of the visual representations I've seen of this, paintings and whatnot, I mean, she's on the ground, she's dirty, been drugged from the house, right at the edge of life, and that's
what she was spared from. So I'm sure that is foremost in her mind. I'm sure when they're having this conversation, she's still there laying on the ground and has to get up and go about her life. And I'm sure that is very, very front and center in her
Yeah.
mind.
So Jesus says to her, with that in mind, I want you to live your life in a certain way from now on. And what's her mindset towards that command? What? It's almost a privilege. It's almost a privilege for me to go and not sin anymore. Of course, you just saved my life, literally saved my life from this public, mortal situation that I was in. And Jesus says, go and live a different kind of life. And her response is, of course I will. And I imagine it even changes the color of the sin that she's tempted by in the first place. You look at that, and the temptation doesn't pull so strong as it used to pull, because look at what Jesus has done for me. And that's the thing that I have this in my notes. I wanted to call this class Grace Demands Grace, but everything these last two classes has been built into this. This is the thing that I really want us to see. The grace that God has given to us, this is my key word. It is our motivation to respond to Him and to live in the way that we live. We don't respond to God because we have to, or because He's commanded it, or because I'm going to go to hell if I don't. We look at what He's done for us, and it evokes these reactions towards Him. That's what this is tonight. You want to say anything about that before? Okay, gratitude. I'll put the different verses I want to read on each one. Let's go to Romans 6. Excuse me. One of the things that you see, you're not going to see it like this. This is not the way that it happens. It's not as clear as what I've made it out to be, where God has been gracious to me, and so the writers say, because God has been gracious to me, this is what I'm going to do for Him. But in this conversation of God's grace, whenever you see any conversation of God's grace, if you just read a couple lines either up or down, you're going to see gratitude almost every time. And so would somebody read Romans 6 verses 14 to 18? And what we're looking for is both grace and gratitude. Okay, so I think the biggest one here that I'm looking at is, here is this big conversation of having been set free from sin, and then you come to verse 17, and it's almost like Paul just can't help but say, thanks be to God that you who were once slaves of sin have become obedient from the heart to a standard of teaching to which you were committed. And it's when there's grace, there's gratitude. It's in no way a repayment of the gift that He's given, but it is what we give. If He has been gracious to us, we give thanks to Him. It's an expectation, it's a demand. Grace demands grace. Gratitude is an example of that. 2 Corinthians 9, nobody wants to make any comments on that. You can just interrupt as we go. 2 Corinthians 9 is the next one. Verses 12 through 15. Would somebody read that, please?
For the ministry of this service is not only supplying the needs of the saints, but is also overflowing in many thanksgivings to God. By their approval of this service, they will glorify God because of your submission that comes from your confession of the gospel of Christ and the generosity of your contribution for them and for all others.
Is there more? Would you go to 15?
While they long for you and pray for you because of the surpassing grace of God upon you, thanks be to God for his inexpressible gift.
Yeah. So the work that God has done that is causing other people to respond, I like the way that he says it in verse 12. He says, it is overflowing in many thanksgivings to God. That's the response. Think of overflowing, like here's a cup of thanksgiving to God, and there's so much thanksgiving to God that it's just overflowing. The cup can't hold it. There's too much thanks, too much gratitude. And then he finishes the conversation about grace, and this is his response. Thanks be to God for his inexpressible gift. What can I possibly give to God after what he's given to me? I can be thankful. Gratitude, not only in my heart, but with my words. Comments on that? I got a couple things for you on this one. See that you do not forget what you were before, lest you take for granted the grace and mercy you receive from God and forget to express your gratitude each day. That is, don't ever forget what you were before he saved you. And when you remember that every single day, the response is to express gratitude. And then I like this one too. I saw this not long ago. A life of gratitude. That's something. Not just, hey, thanks. A life of gratitude. I did not plan this with Thanksgiving being tomorrow. It works out really well, but that's not what we're doing. That's Sunday. A life of gratitude to God for being forgiven is far more pleasing than that life based on self-righteousness over being good. That's saying, let's say you're a really good person and you walk around knowing, hey, I'm going to live a life of self-righteousness. I am really good. What Keller's saying is, no. The life lived out of gratitude is far more pleasing to God than that self-righteous attitude of, look how good I am.
That quote we had before about Martin Luther reminds me of the Jews had the Passover feast, and that was for them to remember them coming out of Egypt and all the things that went into that, and remember where they came from and where they are now.
Yeah.
And then, like that to us, is the Lord's Supper we do each week, and we're supposed to remember those things, why we are where we are now.
Yes. And do you know the Catholics refer to what we call the Lord's Supper, they call it the Eucharist. And it's called the Eucharist because the Greek word Eucharisto is to give thanks. And so what Jesus gave to me, the very least that I can do is be thankful.
This thought of gratitude because of the grace we've been given kind of seems like the natural result is going to be worship. Or like that's something that we will return is worship. I was thinking about the word worship, and one of the definitions in Strong's definition for proskuneo, the Greek word for worship. It's like it's a derivative of a word that means to kiss, or like a dog licking a master's hand. So like just something lowly giving his master praise.
Yeah, that's good. I like that definition. So just being thankful. Like it'll be easy tomorrow because it's Thanksgiving and that's what we should be doing. But every single day. The goal of this class every single day is to say, look at what God has given to me. I will give him gratitude. Yeah, we'll do Ryan and then Dave.
Tying into like one of the other points that you like the service in the context here with the collections going to Jerusalem, and that passage that we just read, it says, "And they will glorify God," thanksgiving to him, but also it says the generosity of their contribution.
Yeah.
So they're doing things too.
Yeah. That thing that they did, the contribution in 2 Corinthians 8 and 9, the money that they sent is called grace. We'll have a whole class on that. Because, and that is, today we're going to say, oh yeah, service. And then we're going to have a whole class on, no, God gave us this, we give it to other people. Yeah, Dave?
Luke's comment on the dog, and it's made me think of, I think it's an expression that's not been used too often in my life, but the idea of a dog that bites the master's hand. The image of that, and when we see that happening amongst people, we are naturally, in my opinion, repulsed by that act. And we see that with people who are consumed with what they want, and other people reaching out very far to support them. And so when that is not received with gratitude, it is envisioned with just like a backwards feeling
Yeah.
that this ought not to be.
Yeah.
And I know I've said this before, but I really think this is one of the reasons why God magnifies so much what he does in the Exodus, where they're calling out for a deliverer. Like the example you used was John 8, with the woman that was forgiven of her sin. They called out for a deliverer, and God does just that. And instead of gratitude and thankfulness and worship to him, they make idols and grumble against their deliverer of Moses. And then in the wilderness for 40 years, it seems that there's no change of heart, and they all die.
Yeah.
And when they go to the promised land, what's God calling for them but to believe his word? And they still don't believe.
Yeah. I was reading yesterday something from those children of Israel in the wilderness, and they actually said the words, all we have is this manna and quail. It's like, wait a second, all you have? You know the alternative is starvation, right? Like the response, all we have is gross, and it ruins it. The response is gratitude. Okay, next. You can keep talking about gratitude, because I did gratitude first, because I think that's just the foundation of everything we're doing here. So we'll keep coming back to it. But public recognition. Let's go to Mark 5. Here's a great example of public recognition. When Jesus healed the man with a demon, the Gerasene demoniac. This is the guy in the tombs who was chained up, possessed by a demon, and Jesus. Every time I read this passage, I feel like I have to say something about deviled ham. I know that I don't, but I feel like I do. Jesus cast the demons into the pigs. And so here is the man at the end of that story. In verse 18, Jesus and his disciples, as he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed with the demons begged him that he might be with him. And that's the thing. That's the thing that we're talking about right now. This guy just saved my life. I don't know where you're going, but I'm going with you. I don't know what you're doing. I don't know how you're living, but where you are, that's where I'm going to be. That's his mindset. I'm begging you. I want to go with you. And Jesus' response is no. Verse 19, go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you. And so he went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and everyone marveled. And I think that this makes the story even better. I mean, it's neat that he says, okay. And you know this guy went and he was like, I'm going to tell every single person I know what has happened here. But the Decapolis, Polis is city. What's Deca? 10. This guy did it in 10 cities. That's the Decapolis is a collection of 10 cities. And so he's going everywhere and telling everyone what Jesus has done. And it's not, now that you are a follower of Jesus, you must do evangelism. And here is the weight, burden that is set upon your shoulders. You must go and do this thing. No, you could not have stopped him from doing that thing.
This isn't the exact same, but if I could relate to it on a corporate type situation or like with the work I do for clients, if they love what I do, I mean, they're going to tell everybody about it. And that makes my work. I don't have to do anything because then people are coming to me. So they're evangelizing. For me, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Because it's, I don't even have to say anything. They're going to just.
Perfect. That word of mouth is powerful, right? Free advertising. And that's what we do. Look at this one, 1 Peter 2 and verses 9 and 10. I like the 1 Peter passage because it's almost like a so what. This happened, so what? 1 Peter chapter 2 and verses 9 and 10. I know that you're not the audience of this letter, but let's point and say you. This is you. This is what Jesus is saying about you. You are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession. Now listen. That you may proclaim his excellencies. He did this for you, and so what's my response? I will proclaim his excellencies. That you may proclaim his excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. And so God has done this for me. Here's what I will do for him. I will proclaim his excellencies to anybody who's going to listen, and even those who won't.
We were talking earlier about standing at the gate of the city and telling everyone about the glories of that person or the grace that person bestowed. Is that related at all to the triumphal entry with the laying of branches and the crying out of Hosanna as Jesus enters? Or is that sort of a whole separate
To the what?
triumphal entry when Jesus enters Jerusalem?
I still don't understand the word you're saying.
The triumphal entry
Oh,
in Mark chapter 11.
I don't know. I don't know if that's a response. I mean, it is a response to who Jesus is. The Hosanna, the call Hosanna, here comes the King, the Messiah, but I don't know if that's the same thing. But let's call it the same thing in the same category, because what we're going to call it is my response to the one who has given. Yeah, I will lay down my clothes on the road for you. It's palm branches, whatever. I saw other hands. Who was that? Yeah, Megan?
I think a perfect example is David in the Psalms over and over again. He says, basically, I will praise your name to everyone. I will shout what you did for me to everyone. Specifically in Psalm 40, he says it twice actually in the Psalm. That it's almost this feeling of like, I can't be quiet.
Yeah.
Because I'm so excited about what you just did for me.
Yeah, perfect. So look at this. I like this quote in this context. And I want you to think about this, truly think about this. A grateful heart is the source of evangelism and witness. Which is perhaps, the grateful heart is perhaps most effectively done as we simply and honestly give public praise for the gifts and help we have received from God. Perhaps some shirk from evangelism because they think we need to work through Romans or talk about the deity of Christ. Begin by speaking openly rather about the favor God has shown you, the positive difference God's gifts have made in your life. Tell other people facing great need about the one who supplies every need generously. And so you go into evangelism not with, I'm going to work you through this program and take you from 0 to 10. I'm just going to tell you how awesome God has been to me. That's all. I'm not even speaking to you with evangelism in mind. Do whatever you want with it. I'm just going to tell you what he's done for me. That's all I'm doing.
I think too, talking about all this is, we have to have in our minds forethought to look for everything that God is giving us grace in. And be thankful in everything, and look to everything that happens in your life. And if something positive happens, give God that glory.
Yeah.
You know, I was 5 minutes late for work, but oh look, there was an accident right there. Maybe I would have been in that accident, maybe God made my shoe come untied and I stopped to tie it, or had to go back in and grab something. You know, those kinds of things, to me, you're giving God that glory, and the more you talk about it, the more people start thinking about these things.
Yeah.
And the more they start looking for things that God is to be thankful to God for.
Yeah. So I wasn't going to do this because I'm not saying that this is wrong or bad. I don't prefer my main method to be motivation through negative stuff. But we'll do a real quick exercise here. Your comment made me think of this exercise. I come to you and I say, tell me something that God has done for you right now. Tell me what the Lord has done for you. And if you sit here and you go like this, we have a problem. If 35 things don't just fall out of my mouth, I might just say, how about we reset? And our mind needs to constantly be focused on, look at everything God has done for me. And you say, what has God done for you? And I'm like, dude, I cannot tell you what God has not done for me. How much time do you have? And we're just going to start. That's the kind of thing that I want us to be doing. I want us to be so mindful of it all the time that we cannot help but tell other people about it. Services performed. How about Ephesians 2? Let's only do one. We're running out of time. Ephesians 2, verses 8 through 10. I like this passage. If you want to highlight something in your Bible, this is the statement, and I hope that you remember this. Read it from the text, but I hope that you remember the mindset. None of us were saved by our works. And so this is the statement to remember. How are we saved? Not by works, but for works. That's what this passage is. Verse 8, by grace you have been saved through faith. It is not your own doing. It is the gift of God. There's our grace, gift. Listen, this is highlighted so I can see it. Not as a result of works, so that no one may boast. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus, highlighted, for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. I am not saved by my good works, but I am saved for good works. And that fits into this services performed. God did this for me. I will do whatever I can. I should be willing to do whatever I can for him. This is a context. Clients would return gratitude in the form not only of honor and loyalty, but also in services performed for the patron. It is here that good works, acts of obedience, and the pursuit of virtue are held together inseparably from the reception of God's favor and kindness. A life of obedience to Jesus' teachings are the apostles' admonitions. In short, I like this. Here we go. A life of good works are not offered to gain favor from God, but nevertheless they must be offered in grateful response to God. To refuse those is to refuse the patron who gave his all for us, the return he specifically requests from us. So, I've done this thing for you that you will never be able to repay. Jesus God gave his son Jesus to die on the cross for our sins, willingly, voluntarily, before I even asked for it. He said, I've taken care of this for you. Here is salvation. My response should be like that woman caught in adultery. What can I do for you? I will do anything for you. You have my life.
I love the word patron there because it shows like a clear hierarchy. I feel like today, even our language, if there's a business transaction, it's, they're partners in business or they're collaborating together. But no, it's a patron. I'm paying for some type of service to be rendered back. And I feel like we have like a total equality, especially in our business sense of, no, we're really just in partnership together. But that was not what the ancient world was like at all. It really was a patron.
No, right?
I did this for the city, so you're going to name the public square after me.
Yeah, yeah.
It's patronship.
Yeah, that's right. Did you have something? No? I thought I saw one over here. Oh man, there's lots. Let's do Lisa, Morgan, Nick.
Going back to 1 Peter, it talks about standing in grace. And I think, well, you're not commanded to stand in something that's easy to stand in, the idea of standing in grace. I think about like the biggest gift outside of, receiving God's grace, maybe for me, is the birth of my children. That's excruciating. So how can something be the biggest gift, biggest grace, and yet it's excruciating to stand in? And so I think 1 Peter just lays it out, and he talks about the grace you return to God is your suffering and your obedience and your loyalty. And so while I like to think I'm all of those things you talked about earlier, having this attitude of gratitude, sometimes my obedience or my loyalty or my suffering, that's the grace I can give back to God. There's sometimes a really hard side of Christianity that I sometimes, I don't know. So this standing in grace is definitely something to think about.
Good. Morgan?
I was just gonna say, this is really compelling to somebody who doesn't know God and doesn't know salvation, this story that, like the picture of salvation and how we're saved for good works, not by our good works. I think that when we live this way, it's like, I don't know, it's just such an amazing story to tell and share, and it's so much more compelling and challenging. And I don't know if you're struggling with those points you were talking about. I think it might be a good idea to think about, are you motivated by the grace, or are you like motivated by fear? And it's kind of hard to know where you stand, but I think the gratitude and service and telling people about Jesus, those are really good like barometers or tests you can give yourself to say, am I doing these things? Is this a result of my love for God and gratitude for His grace? I love a test. I want to know where I stand all the time. And that is really helpful to me to just zoom out and look at Morgan and say, okay, am I doing those things? And is that like the natural, I hate the word natural, is that the result of my heart?
Yeah.
You know?
So, Nick, I'm coming to you last, but no, I'm probably not. Sorry. But this is going to be the last thing I say in class, but I want to say it now because since we're having this conversation, do you remember our first class where we talked about the stuff that makes us nervous about grace? I'm not even pinning this on you. The stuff that makes me nervous about talking about grace. One of the things at the very top of that list is whenever people start getting super deep into this conversation about grace, one of my biggest fears is that you're just going to live flippantly and it's going to lead to a life of sin. And I'm justified. I'm justified in this conversation because that's exactly what Paul said in Romans 6. What shall we say? That I'm just going to keep on sinning because grace is going to abound. If that's my fear, this is the irony about this whole conversation right now. I feel afraid to talk about it because I'm afraid that it will lead to this. And this is the crazy part about it. Talking about the grace of God is the thing that leads to the thing that we want. So it's like ignoring it and not talking about it because we're afraid it's going to lead to sin is the thing that is not going to lead to the desired end result, which is to work out of motivation for, whatever. Did you have something?
Nick was before me.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Nick said, go ahead.
This may not be helpful, but what you were just saying, and Lisa reminded me, I don't know a lot of some of these people that you quote from, but I quote from somebody, and it's Andy Cantrell, that taught me before he takes people to 1 Peter to teach them about grace, because Peter writes his whole letter, and at the end of it he says, I've written to you about the grace of God, now take your stand in it, which Lisa said. It's not what you would expect.
Yeah.
It's not what we would think of. There's so much suffering and a life of challenge and all those things. Anyways.
Well, which perfectly points to the last thing, loyalty. That Hebrews 13 passage is the one that says, since he suffered outside the gate, let us go to him. They took Jesus outside of the city and hung him on the cross. And you say, look at what he did for me. What's my response? He's out there, I'm going out there too. The loyalty. And so here's your last thing that I'll do for the class. Given the cost Jesus was willing to incur in bringing us into God's favor, the believer should be emboldened to make a like return, leaving behind worldly comfort, honor, and safety for the sake of response to Jesus. Loyalty to God means being careful to avoid courting God's enemies as potential patrons as well. And it's this. Look at what he did for me. I'm yours now. In good times and bad, in sickness and health. Well, I'm here. Okay, that's grace for grace. They're standing at the gates, so I'm going to stop class, but I'll tell you where this is going. The next class in 1 week is going to be called Grace to Overcome Sin. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to talk about my temptation to sin and my sin that I walk in and live in, the walking in darkness, and how the solution to that problem is not, well, Mark, you just need to try harder. The solution to that problem is to dive deeper into God's grace. And so that'll be next Wednesday. All right. Thank you very much for your conversation tonight.